Welcome to Blood Sugar Squad, your go-to channel for simple, actionable tips to manage diabetes and live your best life. You have probably seen the videos: cook your rice, cool it overnight, and suddenly it is diabetic-friendly. Freeze your bread, toast it, and the glucose spike magically disappears. It sounds too good to be true. And if you've been managing diabetes for any length of time, you have learned to be skeptical of anything that sounds like a magic bullet. So what is the truth? Does the freezing trick actually lower blood sugar? Or is it just another internet myth? In this video, we are going to look at peer-reviewed studies on rice, bread, and the fascinating process called starch retrogradation. We will tell you what works, how much it helps, and most importantly, whether it is worth adding to your diabetes management toolkit. Segment 1. The science. Before we look at the research on specific foods, we need to understand the science. Because once you understand what is actually happening, the freezing trick stops sounding like magic and starts sounding like simple chemistry. Here is what happens when you cook rice or bake bread. The starch molecules inside the food absorb water and swell up. This process is called gelatinization. The swollen, water-filled starch molecules are easy for your digestive enzymes to break down. That is why freshly cooked white rice can spike your blood sugar so quickly. The starch is wide open and ready to be absorbed. Now here is where the trick comes in. When you cool that cooked starch, especially if you cool it overnight in the refrigerator or freeze it, something changes. The starch molecules begin to recrystallize. They form a tighter, more ordered structure. This is starch retrogradation. Some of this recrystallized starch becomes what scientists call resistant starch. Resistant starch is exactly what it sounds like. It resists digestion. Your small intestine cannot break it down as easily. Instead, more of it passes through to your large intestine, where it acts more like fiber than carbohydrate. The result is a slower, lower blood sugar rise after eating. Starch retrogradation is a real, well-documented phenomenon. The question is not whether it happens. The question is how much it helps, and whether that difference matters for your daily blood sugar management. Segment 2. The rice research. Now let's look at the research on rice, specifically white rice, the kind that usually sends blood sugar soaring. Several clinical studies have tested exactly what we're talking about. Freshly cooked white rice compared to rice that's been cooled, typically around 24 hours in the refrigerator, and then reheated. The findings are consistent. Cooling the rice increases the amount of resistant starch through starch retrogradation. In some studies, the resistant starch content roughly doubles or even triples compared to freshly cooked rice. Now, you might be wondering, does it matter if you refrigerate it or freeze it? The short answer is that both can promote starch retrogradation, but whether one works better than the other depends on the food, and we'll come back to that after we look at bread. The real question is blood sugar. When researchers measured glycemic response, how much and how quickly blood sugar rises, they found that cooled and reheated rice produces a lower response than freshly cooked rice. In practical terms, the reduction is often in the range of about 10 to 20%. To put that in perspective, if fresh rice spikes you to 180 nanosilmers DL, the cooled and reheated version might peak closer to 150 or 160. That's not a dramatic change. It doesn't turn rice into a low glycemic food, but it is a real measurable improvement. The key takeaway from the research is simple. Starch retrogradation increases resistant starch, and that can modestly reduce the blood sugar impact of rice. Now, timing matters, but not in an all-or-nothing way. Cooling for longer periods, like 24 hours, tends to produce more resistant starch than shorter cooling times. Some studies using very short cooling periods, like an hour or so, show little to no meaningful effect. So while it doesn't have to be exact, longer cooling generally works better. And when you're ready to eat, reheat the rice until it's steaming hot. That's mainly for food safety, and it does not eliminate the resistant starch that formed during cooling. One more thing. The effect is real, but it's modest. This is not a free pass to eat unlimited rice. It still contains carbohydrates, and it will still raise your blood sugar, just not quite as much as freshly cooked rice. Segment 3. The bread research. Now let's talk about bread. And this is where things get especially interesting. While rice shows a modest improvement, some studies on bread suggest the effect can be a bit larger, especially when freezing and toasting are combined. A well-known 2008 study published in the European Journal of Clinical Nutrition tested white bread under 4 conditions: fresh bread, bread that was frozen and then defrosted, freshly toasted bread, and bread toasted directly from frozen. The results were clear. All three preparation methods lowered the blood sugar response compared to fresh bread. Even toasting alone made a difference. But the most effective method was toasting the bread directly from frozen. That produced the lowest glucose spike of all. So what is going on here? Part of it is the same starch retrogradation process we discussed earlier. Cooling and freezing allow some of the starch to reorganize into a more resistant form. Toasting may add to this effect by further altering the structure of the starch, although the exact mechanism is still being studied. More recent research has generally supported these findings. Frozen and reheated or toasted bread tends to produce a lower blood sugar response than fresh bread. But again, the improvement is real and modest. You may see claims that freezing and toasting bread cuts the glycemic index in half. For most people, that is likely an overstatement. The reduction is meaningful, but not dramatic. Here is the practical takeaway. Freezing helps and toasting helps. But combining the two, especially toasting directly from frozen, appears to give the greatest benefit. So if you are a bread lover, a simple strategy is to slice your bread and store it in the freezer. When you want a slice, put it straight into the toaster without defrosting. That approach lines up best with what the research suggests. Just remember that frozen and toasted bread still contains carbohydrates, and it will still raise your blood sugar, just not quite as much as fresh bread. Segment 4, Final Thoughts. So, does the freezing trick lower blood sugar? Yes, but modestly. Cooling starchy foods like rice and bread increases resistant starch through starch retrogradation, which slows digestion and reduces the glucose spike. Now, what about that big question, refrigerator or freezer? For most foods, cooling is what matters. Refrigeration is enough to trigger starch retrogradation, and longer cooling generally increases the effect. Freezing can add a small benefit in some cases, especially with bread, but for everyday use, the refrigerator does most of the work. For rice, cook it, cool it, and reheat it later. For bread, freezing and toasting, especially from frozen, appears to give the best results. The effect is real, but not dramatic. And this does not turn high-carb foods into low-carb foods. It simply reduces the spike. Have you tried this trick? Let us know in the comments, and please share this video with someone who loves rice and bread. Until next time, stay strong, stay sweet, but not too sweet, and keep thriving with the Blood Sugar Squad.